listening to Bridge Between Worlds Radio. Transporting you like the Tesseract outside time, space, the physical universe. And here is your host from another universe, H.E. Gamboi.
Hello, I'm your host, H.E. Gamboi, and I want to welcome you to Bridge Between Worlds Radio. We have some intriguing out-of-body things to talk about tonight. It's sort of like the saying, you can walk with your feet on earth and your consciousness in heaven. And we have tonight's guest is an out-of-body traveler who's had thousands of out-of-body experiences, such as visiting crystal forests, wise sages, hells, and beautiful heavens. So our topic is about secrets of heavens via out-of-body travel. And in the second part of tonight's show, we're going to talk about secrets related to the negative polarity. So this should be an interesting show. I want to say again, hello to our listeners. In tonight's show, we'll interview a very talented out-of-body traveler. And if you take up this science, get ready to float above your body, maybe even above your house. Have you ever wondered what it was like to have an NDE or an OBE and visit heaven? Well, tonight we're gonna find out. So hold on to your rooftop. Just kidding. And tonight's show is recorded on 4th of July. So our guest tonight has decades of experience at out-of-body travel. It's what NDE experiencers call heaven. She is extremely talented at astral projection. That is different than the methods I use. Soul projection. Our guest tonight, she's had a professional career as a broadcaster, and she is an author and teacher of the Out-of-Body Travel Foundation. Her website is outofbodytravel.org. And she's appeared on national television and radio like The Joan Rivers Show and Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. She teaches internationally and has written over 100 books on out-of-body travel. Please, let's welcome Marilyn Hughes. Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, it's great to be with you tonight.
Yes, great to be with you. Very appreciative of how much love and effort you put into your spiritual practice. That's a gift.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely what makes the world go round for me and for all of us, I would say.
Yes, most certainly yes. This is really an intriguing topic, and I know that on another recent interview you did, the host was so thrilled because she was saying, "Wow, this is beyond coincidence." So, beyond coincidence for me too. So.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
But first I was thinking maybe we could talk about the wonder of out-of-body travel to many places and worlds and heavens. You know, examples of, I'm sure you can't talk about all the places you've been, not nearly, but some of the hundreds of places one experiences that wonder of leaving the body and visiting. And I thought we can discuss this.
Sure, yeah. A lot of people look at out-of-body travel as more of the simpler experience of just leaving your body, and they don't realize that it leads to this multidimensional travel that takes you to higher worlds and border worlds and lower worlds, which we'll talk about more later. But some of the things that you're going to see are going to be, the angelic hierarchies. You're going to be seeing the spheres of heaven, which there are an infinite number of those. You can travel forward and backwards in time. You're taken into the realms of initiation and the rites of passage. There is so much. There is so much out there that St. Paul really understated it when he said, "Eye has not seen nor ear heard what God has prepared for those who love him." Because you're literally talking about the crystal forests, but also the crystal cities and the temples in the skies and the white-winged horses and the flying and the stars and the galactic heavens and the innumerable amounts of corridors that you travel through that take you into different and higher and finer vibrational frequencies of existence.
Is there a particular experience that you think sort of captures what you're saying about moving towards a higher state and moving towards sort of like resonating with an awareness and consciousness that comes from a higher place?
Well, gosh, it's so hard when people want me to pinpoint one experience. No, that's okay. There are just so many. Let me just think for a moment.
If you want, while you're thinking, I could bring up one example. I guess
Sure.
Time to think.
Sure, yeah, go for it.
I recall on one occasion, and I've shared this before, where I was asking for guidance related to God. And the next thing I knew, I was in a library, and I closed my eyes, and I reached out my hand, and it touched a book. And almost immediately when I touched the book, I had this flash of this white, glowing brilliance. I had an out-of-body experience where I was in this world of breathtaking, sparkling light particles and a white, pure white spirit universe. And it was just a feeling of total awareness, like a 360-degree viewpoint beyond mine, and seeing, knowing, and being. And it was like omnipresent and filled with so much light and joy and serenity. And I was just blown away, like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. With out-of-body travel, just not just touching heaven, but walking there. Or walking is the wrong word. But,
Well, walking there and moving within its vibration. And then the Palace of Ancient Knowledge, which is this beautiful library in the heavens that contains the knowledge from all time that's ever been known, not just to humankind, but to all worlds. There's so many things because, in the out-of-body travel states, too, you receive knowledge in books that you can kind of take within you. And you receive this not just from books that are already here, but from books that don't exist here, But there's, literally, there's these beautiful cities that are made of the streets of gold, the pearl-esque buildings, the crystal buildings, the emeralds, all of that kind of stuff. All that is beautiful is what you'll find in heaven. Golden angels, the archangels. St. Michael is one of the most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. We see,
and with the Akashic records, and also the records that are on higher levels, it's very beautiful that a being can gain perspective it's unlimited. All the
Yes.
different levels.
Yeah.
But like you brought up, you're talking about guides. Basically, there are different beings or entities, different beings, teachers. People have different words for them: teachers, masters, and so forth. And that's a vital area too.
Yeah, and they have different orders of being. They are different orders of being. So they all serve different functions, and so you'll meet different ones as you're traveling through your journeys, your spiritual journeys, because they're going to take you through many different aspects of your spiritual evolution. So as you pass through one phase of development, then you'll meet more teachers and continue. It'll continue on ad infinitum. There's always more. You'll see temples beneath the sea. You'll see temples that hover in the skies. You'll meet with alien beings and extraterrestrial races, and you'll go to other planets and meet beings that exist in worlds that are filled with complete and utter love and light, and worlds that go well beyond what we can even conceive of as living beyond love and light. You will meet beings that live in worlds that are almost like purely made of crystal, where everything is psychic. Communication pretty much everywhere is telepathic. It's all communication through thought. In the out-of-body travel realms, most of it is through thought, and much of it is through empathy and compassion. So there's that empathic connection, that feeling that is transferred from spirit to spirit, which is just a heightened state of what we can achieve here if we are working on developing our souls a little bit more and learning how to tuning into the oneness that occurs within the humankind as well as all life, and the universal consciousness is one. I mean, you can go to planets where there are thousands of Buddhas. You can go to the Pure Lands. You can go to the astral planets. There's no limit. There's always more. One of the things about these worlds is that everything is always, higher, finer frequency. Colors are brighter. The frequencies are higher. Everything is more vibrant. Your senses are all heightened. There's always this awareness of feeling more and more alive in these places, and so there's just gosh, and I've written so many books about it. I've got over 100 books now about my experiences. So literally, there's thousands of experiences. It's so hard to just synopsize into one thing.
It's very beautiful that you put love into your spiritual practices, because my husband, who's also a spiritual teacher, one of the things that he said sometimes to different students is that when you put love into doing the spiritual reading of the Varden books and the spiritual exercises to leave the body, and the different disciplines like practicing the presence of the teacher, the master,
right,
what happens is you're showing God that you love God, that it's not lip service, that you truly love God, that this inner connection is, actually this is kind of like what you said. Basically, in my path in Varden, we call something the holy fire of God, which is like this inner fire that the more you feed it with study and practice, this love for God grows until it's like all-consuming, like a fire. In some of your works, you also speak about this importance of focusing on God. And I'll quote you. You said in one of your books, you said, God is the heart of it all. The will of God, if it's not central to your search, you'll be misled. The will of God is your goal and destination. And I guess one thing I'd say is there's so many planes and places, like you were saying, that you can go, that gives direction to it all, and that sort of like, would it, in terms of your viewpoint about bringing that to a higher level of focus and intensity.
Well, absolutely. The only thing that matters in the spiritual search is the destination and the journey to get there, and that is God. It is absolutely God is the source and summit of everything that we are seeking. And so absolutely one of the things that can sometimes be lead people astray in the spiritual path is, seeking after anything but that. You know what I mean? That can be the distraction. That can be the distraction that leads people into all sorts of just, other directions, but also just kind of then you end up kind of floating around, but it doesn't really focus the search directionally. God is that directional force. And without that directional force, the search can be very, very impotent, because we need to know to whence do we go? What are we seeking? Whom are we seeking? And so this will of God becomes central to everything. And ironically, you talk about the holy fire, seeking that within ourselves. And this is very similar to the writings of mystical theology from all around the world, from throughout time, So it's all about finding that inner fire, igniting that eternal flame within inside of us, which then literally becomes the directional force that leads us back to God, which is kind of what we've been looking for, but maybe didn't realize it all along.
Yes, most definitely. It's sort of like I would say that out of body travel is like the bridge,
Yes.
the bridge between the physical world and the physical body and the spiritual world, or the pure positive God worlds, which are beyond time and space. It's like that direct connection. And
That's a very good way to put it.
yes. And near-death experience, one of the things I thought was interesting was my husband once said that when someone has a near-death experience, it's almost like they're being given an invitation. But are they going to hang the invitation on their wall like a beautiful decoration, or are they going to use it to actually journey further?
Yeah. A lot of people who have the near-death experiences come back and they do have heightened gifts, and so there does often come with it an opportunity in that arena, and the gifts are different for each person. So so we see, it manifests in different ways what people will bring back, but these gifts, but absolutely, ironically, I love the way you put that because one of the things that people can look at, they can look at out-of-body travel and they don't realize that the tool isn't the truth. The tool is the tool. And, out-of-body travel is like that little bridge. It's this little thing that we build to get from this shore to this other shore. But it's not the truth. It is the tool that we use. But that tool provides us with the access to the truth.
We're going to take a little break, and when we get back, we'll talk more with Marilyn Hughes about the mysteries of how you can lift your body and touch heaven and explore in adventurous ways. And now we're back with Bridge Between Worlds Radio. And I'm your host, H.E. Gamboi. Beginning where we left off.
And so honing that tool, honing the gift, the purpose of that is not because the gift is exalted. It's because the gift or the tool leads us to that greater truth, which eventually brings us back in union with God.
Yes, and that so it's so profound. Like so that's so profound. It's really like some people wish that they had a manual to life that would explain how to do things, how to have direction, how to and this is like a compass, like the inner compass, the book that people.
Well, yes, and one of the things about out-of-body travel that makes it so unique is that it's personalized. you know, Anyone who experiences it knows how out-of-body travel provides us with this personalized journey because we're taken into our own past lives. We're shown the things, the energetic truths about our own path, our own fetters and cravings or attachments. We are literally given a very clear magnifying glass on exactly what it is that we need to alter within our own spiritual bodies in order to progress. And so it's a very specific tool. So it's not like a one size fits all. It's out of body travel will specifically show you those places that are a problem for you. And it'll be different for each one of us. And that's one of the things that makes it so uniquely suited for those who are seeking to purify and go through this soul purification. It's just so uniquely suited for that journey.
Do you have a personal example of purification related to something such as a past life and so forth? That process of it's almost like just doing certain practices themselves unwinds that naturally, very naturally.
Yeah, the purification process can be very, very involved. So, for instance, in the past lives, what I experienced was going into a variety of past existences, and over time I would write them down and realize that there were these patterns of behavior. There would be these conglomeration of a conjunction of souls that were all present in these particular lifetimes, and we were running into like the same problem in these lifetimes. And so I would then be able to kind of see how in each lifetime that was handled differently and kind of see how it played out. And usually it didn't go out, it didn't happen, it didn't turn out well. That's part of the reason I'm still here. And then there would also be the other parts of the purification, which would be I would be shown things about my own things like I would be shown things in the out-of-body travel states about my own vices, like my own lusts, my own issues with the misuse of words, not being aware enough of gossip, and other things that were much more serious. Going through my own purification with childhood trauma, adult trauma, other things like that. But I went through this, I wrote about it in the Mysteries of the Redemption, what I call the red jacket karma, which is about this lengthy, the three soul conglomeration between my soul, the soul of a Native American by the name of Red Jacket, and the soul of another man who I was married to. And this is, the names and the roles that we played in a particular lifetime somewhere in the mid or early 1800s. And then I would experience these similar lifetimes that would be before, after, where we would have the same three souls, and it would be the same issues, but it would be manifesting in a different lifetime. And so you go back and you start really examining over a great deal of time as to how things have been kind of misunderstood, how eternal love has been misunderstood, how you have misused energy, love, or even just other people or things, or, whatever it might be in your karmic past, and you seek to try to remedy those things in the present, trying to understand them.
It's very interesting because a lot of times when people look in their lives, they see certain things going wrong and certain problems and issues or certain positive things. And not everybody makes the connection like you're making of being able to take this step back to get above the time track, to look at these different records and see, oh, I have this illness because I did XYZ. I know an individual in their past life, they call it their poison pen lifetime, where they were a lawyer and they abused their power by writing false things about people to get those people hurt, imprisoned, attacked, demeaned. And it's a form of black magic that very bad consequences. But the consequence of that poison pen lifetime was they incarnated in a body where they had a severe learning disability. So when they wanted to express their gift of writing and so forth, they could not do it without a lot of help. So it's sort of like when you can see those connections, it's interesting because it explains all kinds of things throughout someone's life. It's very, and then also, like you were saying, this process of purification, it's almost like alchemy, where you're boiling something and all the junk boils up to the top so that you're left with pure gold, spiritual gold.
Right. Yes, very much so. Yes. Yes. And we do have a tendency not to realize that the causes and effects that are occurring from the past, present, and the futures that all kind of merge, and how these things can actually be put together to by a great and almighty, all holy God who understands the corrective process, which is, okay, so we are now, we'll just take this example that you've given, where we are now learning to express with great care. And ironically, in Talmudic law, in the Jewish tradition, the sin of gossip, or of, they would call murdering someone's reputation, is really serious and was often akin to murder. One of the things that is definitely brought up to us, and this is one of the things that was made very clear to me because of my own misuse of words and the things that I needed to learn about this, was just how serious it is what we say or do and the consequences of those things, and how much damage those kinds of things can do. And most of us really don't think about how a person's life can be completely destroyed by complete falsehoods. And we see it happen all the time around us in our world, but we don't actually examine that, and examine that is a profound injustice that has to be addressed in the cosmic cycling of existence, And so then when we engage in, which most of us have done in one lifetime or another, we have to then learn restraint. We have to then learn, prudence. We have to learn,
Yes.
So we have to start applying different virtues against some of the vices we may have had in previous existences. But we also then, we go through the process where we are actually examining what it was that we were either just very careless about, in terms of like careless with the lives of others, with our mouth, with our words, or that we just really didn't understand how much damage we were doing. So we're just using this one example. There are a lot of different examples we could use, but this is a really easy example to use. And so we go through the vacation process, which allows us to reevaluate the way that we have used words, the way that we have spoken, and the way that we have thought about these things, and we reform. We're like formation. We are reforming the way that we now think about the use of words and how we are going to use them. We become aware of, training the mind to become much more astute and aware of the thoughtless things that might go through our heads, and becoming almost like, if you can imagine, a catcher where we want to catch the ball before it leaves the mouth. You know what I'm saying? So we start practicing new habits to counter the old habits. And this is part of how this purification process unfolds. We begin to change, and this is how we alter and move closer. And that's how we're then dropping away the fetters, the attachments to things that were in the past, holding us back, holding us further away from an all-holy God. Because if we want to approach an all-holy God, then we have to become more and more aware of what it means to be in the presence of an all-holy and almighty God. And so this is how we begin learning it, because we see, oh, wow, I was not aware that every word that comes out of my mouth echoes in the heavenly courts.
And it's sort of like what we do to others, we ultimately do to ourselves. Because when it comes to karma, it's like we do something to someone else, and then we end up going through that same experience. But I thought you brought up a beautiful point about how it's like you go through this purification before you become worthy of being a co-creator, co-worker with God. And actually that relates to, I brought this up before, I said that I was struck by your last name. Because in with what I practice in Barden, the word Hugh, like your last name Hughes, it's an ancient name for God. It's like the word human, spirit man, God man. That word has a vibration and a consciousness. We have this God worlds chart on our website, but if you look at the chart, it's like a map of heaven, and the word Hugh resonates with what is called the 12th plane, which is the home of God. Or you could say the ocean of love and mercy, the home of God, the Godhead. And basically the word Hugh resonates with that. And I thought it was funny that happens to be your name.
Well, I'm honored by that. Not worthy.
Well, maybe more or less it's like a saying that you were born with the potential to unlock it within you. It reminds me a little bit of Apollonius of Tyana. He was born the moment that gigantic swans were beating their wings. It was a symbol of he would reach a high state. He would be able to have the opportunity to move towards a higher state. So.
Yes. Yes.
So, one of the things that I was thinking of was related to activities, and you brought this up, I believe it was in one of your interviews, about activities that bring your vibrations up to a higher state, like a higher state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
One can rise to a higher level because they resonate with that higher level. In terms of activities that do that, do you have a viewpoint on that?
Well, the primary elements go back to the simple things of prayer, meditation, solitude, spiritual reading. There are also practices, of course, that will do that as well. But those are the kinds of things that are really, and ironically, these have been taught by the prophets, saints, mystics, sages, and ascetics from throughout time, thousands of years, you know. It's interesting because it's nothing new. It's the same it's the same thing as it's always been. Um, but these are the kinds of things, and you mentioned this in the very beginning, doing these things with love in the presence of God is one of the ways that we really energize the ability for, ironically, our guardian angels, the angelic hierarchy, to then start bringing up our vibration and making these types of gifts more enhanced and bringing up our actual vibration. Because, we go through vibrational raisings when you're having out of body experiences to make you more compatible to higher realm travel.
Yes. Yes. If a being or if a person just immediately appeared on a much higher plane of consciousness, such as one of the what I call pure positive God worlds, the shock of it would be so much it would completely overwhelm them, and that's why it's like this stairway of moving from one level of heaven to the next.
Yeah.
Like you said, practicing by reading high vibrational books, pardon, books, doing spiritual exercises to leave the physical body, and of course, studying with a teacher like the Living Barden Master, Naidaza, Alanji, or Rebazar Taurus, or Yabal Sakabi, Advanced Masters of Tusa Travel, who had basically one of the ways my husband and I have sometimes put this is like when you choose a teacher, you also choose a destination. So if a teacher is resonating with a certain plane, if a teacher is resonating with a lower astral plane, then that's the destination that you're choosing. So it's important, when people are aware of that, choosing a teacher is choosing a destination.
Very much so, true. And another thing about what you're saying, one of the things I was shown several times throughout my journeys, and especially in the beginning, when I was going through the vibrational raisings, I was shown, so that I would see why they were so necessary, that when you would try to enter into a realm that was above your vibrational level, you would feel as though you were being crushed. And so it's just because it's a higher vibration, and so I immediately understood that this wasn't just some, pointless effort, that there's actually a reason behind it that is necessary in order for us to attain to those higher heavenly spaces.
Yes. And that's a beautiful thing to be aware of about this process, because when you're aware of it the way you are, then you can be patient through the growing pains.
Yeah, there's definitely those.
Because I noticed there are some people, they work off a little karma on the inner. Instead of having to be in a car accident on the outer to work off some karma, they have an experience on the inner. It's a traumatic dream or something where they're working off karma in the dream state, and then they get upset and they don't want to do it anymore and thinking, wait a minute, you didn't have to physically experience that. Scared and running away. It's so weird. But I think part of it is appreciation, really having an appreciation that it's a gift. Even though some things are uncomfortable, it's a gift to wade through the process patiently to get to the other side.
Yes, exactly. And it is absolutely, it's still an acceleration, even if you're doing it, even if you're going through stuff that's difficult, like you're talking about, it's still an acceleration to do it in this manner. And so if you can keep that in perspective, like you were saying, and sometimes it's hard to do that because you don't realize it's kind of like even just going back to the old story of Nineveh, where Jonah's like, geez, now they don't really know what would have happened if they hadn't put on the sackcloth. You know what I mean? Because the punishment didn't come down because they all obeyed the command, but it didn't come down, so the punishment was averted. And this is what we need to understand about karma. Obviously, when you are able to work out any kind of thing energetically without it hitting the ground, you are very much accelerating that, and it is a great gift to be able to work through it in that way, as opposed to having to go through the whole process in the physical, because that's always a much harder road to go through.
Yes. Yes, and Barton, when people work out karma, they can work out thousands of years of karma in a short amount of time. And it's interesting. I could give one example that's just really kind of strange. I knew one individual who shared that he worked at the World Trade Center, and at one point he woke up with this terrible dream that people were throwing bricks at him, and he was getting hurt and injured, and he said that all of a sudden he had this terrible stomach pain. It was so bad that he did not go to work that day at the World Trade Center.
Yep.
And so what he learned was that because he was working with the Varden Masters, spiritual travelers, that he was given the opportunity, instead of dying because of this group karma of some war things that went on in the past lives, he was able to work this group karma out in the dream state. And he didn't die in the World Trade Center that day that those terrible things happened, because he was able to work out the karma on the inner planes, and it's sort of like consciously working through things. It's like going into that more direct route where you can just sort of let go and let God, and you see the reason behind things, and it's not as much of a mystery. So.
Right, yeah, for sure.
So right now we're going to take a little break. So
okay.
So just imagine for a moment, for those of you who are listening, if you could leave your body and see above your house or see heaven. Well, you can. So because we're blessed to have here tonight Marilyn Hughes, who's leaving her body to view countless realms, hells, and heavens, and having that beautiful spiritual connection. So when we get back, we'll talk more about that. Again, you're listening to Bridge Between Worlds Radio, and this is H.E. Gamboi. When we get back, we'll once again speak with Marilyn Hughes. Celebrate 4th of July with Bridge Between Worlds Radio. Okay, and we're back here once again with Marilyn Hughes on Bridge Between Worlds Radio. Hi, Marilyn again.
Hi, it's great to be back.
Yes. Wow, so fascinating. Very, very beautiful, your experiences and the awarenesses that have opened up to you from all the practice that you've done for so many years. You've been doing this since the 80s?
Yes. Yes, I am that old.
Well, the way I'm just ages in the eye of the beholder.
That's true. That's true. I was just giving you a hard time because it's fun, but it's okay. I'm just kidding. Yes, I've been doing it since yeah, it started in 1987. Yeah, so 1987. Been doing it since then, and yeah.
So now, I think for the second part of the show, I was thinking we can get into this whole concept since this is interesting. Um, before we came to have Marilyn on the show, I actually I didn't know that this was being arranged, and when I found out, I was surprised because actually, Marilyn, you're one of the things that you've been trained in related to working with souls in the negative polarity. You've spoken in some of your interviews about rescuing souls from hell.
Yep.
Which is unique. It's actually similar to a specialty that I've been trained in many past lives, but maybe in sort of like a somewhat different way. I've been trained to work with souls in the negative polarity to help them not really escape hell, but more or less graduate from reincarnation and karma and move to being co-creator with God. I know there are a lot of negative polarity souls kind of like, don't like God. but
Yeah.
But really, the negative power sort of works for God, so how else can you put it? To help temper souls or train souls for that purpose once they iron out all of their their inadequate areas.
Yeah.
So, in regards to that, maybe we can discuss a little bit about maybe one personal experience or example or examples of working with souls in the negative polarity who've made, like a soul in the negative polarity who made a profound breakthrough. One of those special circumstances that not everybody does.
Well, yeah, I could tell you a story about a couple of souls that kind of I worked with together for a period of time. Because some of the souls, I work with souls who are going through their afterlife journeys as well as, just their initial crossings. So I deal with initial crossings. I'll deal with moments when a soul is in a lower realm and they're ready to make a change to move to a slightly higher space. So they've made a change in their frequency that's allowed for help to be sent from above. But I also work with, souls in their afterlife journeys as a general rule. And so I had a really lengthy, like over a 3-year period of time, lengthy and very beautiful journey with two souls. It was a very tragic story of two suicides. And it was a young girl committed suicide, and she was heartbroken over somebody, and there were other factors to her suicide. But a month later, the young man involved committed suicide as well. And the young woman was in a fairly innocent state at the time of her suicide, but she had a lot of contamination. So she was going through a variety of very serious chaos realms, but also she had a lot of confusion because of a lot of misperceptions, a lot of things that she did not correctly understand at the time that she made the decisions that she made. So she was going to be set up for a long period of going through a series of realms that were going to reteach her, help her to re-understand things that she had not seen as they truly were. Unfortunately for the young man, he had taken her down a really dark road, and his actions in her regard had been so seriously askew that when he committed suicide, he was in a deep of the lower sphere that I just felt there was no hope for him in any type of anytime soon, I guess to put it. um, and what you see in these lower realms is that sometimes it takes a long time because souls are very attached to their to where they're at, and sometimes it happens more quickly if they're not as attached to it. But this particular soul had really contributed to this young woman's suicide, not intentionally in the sense of he didn't, convince her to do it, but he had done things that had really pushed her over the edge, and so it was almost considered like a homicide in that he was carrying on his soul. So it was very serious. And so he was in this really dark place. It was when you're dealing with something like that, very dark, black place, a lot of predatory beings in this realm. When you are a predator in life, you go to places where you are the prey, so to speak, So it was kind of like this, and it was just a really icky place to be. I didn't expect much for him, but I continued to pray for him, and I was working with her all that time. She was going through a lot of purifications, a lot of places where it was almost like summer camp in some regards for her in some places. I know it sounds funny to say that, but literally there was this one realm where there were like little log cabins, and she was there with other souls, and they all had counselors, and it was a very, this was very compassionate place where they were trying to help these souls that were like her and others like her who had gone through some traumas, and then she would eventually move up to where she was actually in like what would be a school. It was almost like a university environment, and she was in a much brighter space, but there came a point. And hard to put into words, but literally I was shown one day, and I'm getting slammed as I share it, but they came to me together, and it was 3 years later, and they had been reunited in the heavens. They had gone through their own personal purifications. I had not really helped the young man through his purification. I had been aware of him and where he was, so it must have been another spiritual guardian working with him. But they had both purified to the degree that now they had been united again, and they were together, and they were traveling this next part of their journey together in the afterlife, and it was just so beautiful. And
Healed.
they had really healed, and it was I can't even, wow, I mean, it was just beautiful, because if you had been in this place where he was and where she began too, and it was so tragic, two families torn apart by this. So tragic. And then just even a few months later, I'll just share this, even though this is kind of personal, but I'll share it. I had an experience a few months later, and my son had what should have been a fatal fall off of a bridge.
Ooh.
And he miraculously survived and was fine. He
Wow.
barely, he was fine. And they came to me several months after that, and they showed me how they had been given permission to catch him on the way down because of the fact that I had helped them. And I I was just so touched and moved by that. I mean, I can barely talk about it even now, years later,
Yeah, it's so sweet.
because it was an amazing thing because it was just. But this is something I've talked about in a lot of my interviews too, is that we are always told that we are to give back to creation that which creation gives to us. And
Yes.
that day I certainly got a lot back from creation. I tell you.
Yeah, they that's amazing. That's beautiful.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it was a miracle, and I knew it. I felt it in every depth of my bones and my being. And when they told me this, and I just, when they shared it with me, it was shared in such a way that I understood it to be true, and it was just the immensity of that, of what could have happened and what could have gone the other way. But again, we see that how everything is always giving back to one another, you know?
Everything goes full circle. Sort of
Yeah,
like God, God's love, divine love, and from spirit, it flows in a way that is reciprocal. So what we give out comes back to us like breathing in and breathing out.
right, yeah,
That's a beautiful story. Wow.
yeah,
When there's that kind of suffering, to be there as a vehicle of God to help people cross a bridge to healing and to a greater state. Thank you for sharing that. It was interesting. Beautiful story.
you're welcome.
I related to that. Actually, something comes to mind. It's in terms of negative polarity. I've been trained in past lives for a long time at this. I had one interesting experience where there was this this individual who was a Satanist. And I'm not going to say anything about their identity, but anyway, this person was a Satanist, and what happened was I was getting attacks, like really, where on the inner planes there was all this psychic attacks happening. It was pretty terrible. Like,
Yeah,
and and what ended up happening was he thought that he hated me.
yeah,
But he was putting all this attention. But in reality, it was like there was a part of him, he felt drawn. And he expressed it as this action of psychic attacks and badass attitude and things like that. But then at one point, because there was him and there was these other people that were attacking, at one point, I looked on the inner planes and I had this knowingness. I was shocked. I looked at him as soul and I saw there was much more there that I wasn't seeing. It's sort of like when you see somebody's behavior and it's just really bad and everything else, you can have preconceptions about the person and
right.
biases and condemn them. So, I was not happy. But then I realized and I looked at him as soul and I saw this person is an advanced soul, but they're expressing this in a destructive way. And they've been through a lot, in past lives and everything else, a lot. And so at that point, and I saw on the inner planes that they were able to see things that were invisible to the other souls that were attacking. They recognized as soul that my path, who I am, had something profound, and they were kind of shocked by it. But I thought, again, with a bias, so I thought to myself, oh, they'll probably, be ready to move to a higher level, maybe 500 years from now. But then all of a sudden, to my shock, I was shown that this person was ready. The reason they were drawn was because this was something they were ready for. And so he was in this lower astral plane. The Satanist was in this lower astral plane where it was very negative and dark, and it looked like he was drowning, like literally drowning, trying to keep his head above water so he wouldn't drown. But then I realized, no, wait a minute. He's not trying to pull me down. He wants to be pulled up. So then Divine Spirit worked with me, and he was pulled out of this lower astral plane. And he had these soul records read by the master, my husband, Naidazah. And in the soul records, he spoke of thousands of years about how this individual, this Satanist, in his past lives, he was this dark black magician in ancient Atlantis, where he had done a lot of dark things with black magic and, some really heavy stuff. But that he put himself through the Holocaust, which, as strange as that sounds, to work off enough of his evil karma to be eligible to enter the spiritual path, Varden. And so some souls are like this old evil where they've actually gone through so much of their dark karma that they realize, oh my God, how empty and vicious and horrifying these lower worlds can be, these worlds of reincarnation and karma. And some of these people, they long for truth so deeply because they've literally been to hell and back. And this person had been to hell and back. So he really longed for something far greater. He longed for truth. He actually became a part of our path and started studying. And he had like a really badass attitude at first. And, he would say things like, he was like complaining, and my husband said to him, if you have that kind of attitude, you're not going to get very far. And then immediately he sort of snapped out of it and changed his attitude completely and really applied himself to his practices. And after 2 years, certain things, addictions fell away. And then by the second year, when he first came in, he said something like, I just say one of these last things. He said, well, after 2 years, if I don't like this and I go back to Satan. And my husband said yes, because that's what they can decide after 2 years. He said yes, you can go back to and by the second year, he was practicing out-of-body travel, and then by the second year, he had a series of profound experiences, but he had this really profound experience deep in the pure positive God worlds, and he experienced incredible light and sound and awareness. Like his awareness just expanded, and he knew things that he didn't know before, and his addictions fell away. And it was such a miracle to see the contrast of going from when I shared about the drowning in the lower astral plane. He said he cried when he heard that because it was just so. The contrast was so shocking.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. That really God loves every single soul, and it's very beautiful.
That is absolutely true. And I remember many times because I would work in a lot of these lower hell realms and purgatorial realms to assist souls to move up or make adjustments or whatever. And I was in a realm with a particular soul who was basically in this hell realm, and I remember just weeping before this headstone, and the angel was standing right in front of me saying, "We weep much for those we love who have sinned much, but the Lord has not forgotten them. The Lord has not forgotten them." And here, even in this hell realm, the angel is sitting there in guard, of this soul. Just waiting for the moment when this soul is ready to reach out. And this particular soul did. So that's another long story over a 10-year period where that soul reached out and is still moving through now the higher purgatories into There's an interesting book called A Wanderer in the Spirit Lands by A. Farnese that was put out in the 1800s that actually catalogs a lot of this type of journey that your listeners might find interesting about how the soul moves from the lower worlds up through into the higher. There was also, I mentioned to you when we talked privately, Earth Store Bodhisattva, the Sutra of the Past Vows of Earth Store Bodhisattva is an ancient sacred text by a Buddhist monk who would go into the hell realms and liberate souls as well. And so, there are other texts throughout history that have been written by mystics who go into these lower spheres and liberate souls like this. And sometimes it's in the way that you just described, where you are working on loosing some of these bonds through the mystical, through the out of body experiences and what you were doing with your practice. You were working while he was still very solid in his stance, but you were still working on loosing those bonds, and then eventually it came to fruition by hitting the ground, you know what I'm saying, where he became open to it in the physical realm. And then there's also the ones that occur, with souls who are, crossing over or who have crossed over, who reside in those spheres where you mystically travel and you're assisting them in making these energetic leaps to the next level. So in my own experience, a lot of times you'll go into the realm, you'll be sent in to assist a particular soul who has reached some type of level where they are ready to leave that sphere. So let's talk about a chaos realm, for example, which, chaos is really, really popular these days. So
The Earth
for
sometimes
some reason,
feels like a chaos realm.
it's got a lot of chaos in it, that's for sure. And there is a lot of, it's interesting when you do work with souls who are crossing over. One of the more popular purgatorial realms that people will go into are some of the chaos realms. It is something that a lot of people end up being very compatible with. And these are places where there's usually some type of a circling rhythm to it, where there's a lot of noise. It's almost like carnivalistic. Sometimes it's present day, sometimes it's 18th century or another era, but it's just people are moving around in a circle and they don't realize that they're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, but they're going around and around and around, and there's just tons of noise, tons of crazy stuff going on, and it's just chaos.
That reminds me a little bit of the ghosts in the bars, and they're reliving the same scene over and over again. Yeah.
Yes, and there's similarity to that. And there is some of that similarity to that also with when you're dealing with ghosts and lost souls, that there can be that element where some of the ghosts do get stuck in a particular moment in time. And that can be part of what you end up doing to help them to transcend that moment and help them to cross over. But, you're kind of doing the same thing for a ghost that is stuck, that you're doing for a soul that's stuck in a purgatorial realm like chaos, or a soul that's stuck in a lower hell realm, because you're literally trying to get them unstuck. And so you're getting set into that place, and you're going to go there with some bit of information that you're going to impart to them about what it is that they need to know, that when they're ready to leave this realm, this is what they need to do. And when they're ready, they do this, and then they will actually be able to go to the next level up. And so they can either go with you at the time that you go down there to come greet them, but if they're not ready to go when you go there, because sometimes they're not, a lot of times they're afraid to go at first, but you give them the information so that after they've had a chance to think about it, they can still move up to the next level, whether you're there or not. And then they go to the next level up. And that even applies as well to what you're doing when you're talking about what happened with your your friend who then had this beautiful experience, because what happened was you were moving in energy within this stuck place that he was moving, and where he was actually a bit assaultive of your energy, but you were working with it in there. And then as it was able to reach consciousness, and see, this is what's beautiful about it, because this is the same type of thing that we saw with the two souls I talked about who had committed suicide, where full circle, you know. And this happened with your friend as well, for you to bring that soul through this energetic alteration over time to the point where he's literally experiencing the full consciousness of God and the light and stream, the movement of the light and stream of sound, from being in that space of being a Satanist. That is a huge chasm that he crossed. And it is unlikely.
Shocking.
Well, it would be unlikely he would have been able to cross it alone. And so he needed help. And so you provided the energetic assistance that was vital for that chasm to be crossed. And so that is how we, as souls, assist one another in giving back to creation what creation gives to us. Because all that we receive, because we are always being formed individually, but then we are giving back too. And this is how it's done, where the Lord allows for us to also be placed within scenarios where we can serve.
Yes.
And this service is absolutely vital to the evolution of the sphere. It is absolutely vital. And I'm getting really slammed right now, because this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about what you wanted to speak about in these negative polarities. It's bringing these things all the way around the full circle, but it is also what the Native Americans would have called the sacred hoop. It's bringing everything full circle to completion. And that's what that is. And those are two examples between what you experienced, what I experienced with these souls. And, I've written about a lot of this kind of stuff in my books too, but this is how it's done. And there are so many of us, and the people who are listening, I'm sure every single one of them has stories like this. And it's important for them to recognize and validate that what is happening and what they are doing is part of this mechanism, because as they contribute to this, they are contributing to the evolution of the sphere, and this is how we are bringing the will of God into the world. That's how we can serve our fellow man, and this is how we serve one another.
Yes, beautifully put. And there's an aspect of that you touched upon, like with the listener and so forth, is that one of the keys to really being masterful at out-of-body travel is really loving oneself as soul. Because a lot of times people condemn themselves, they beat themselves up, they made mistakes, they did things they regret, things that make them feel like they are unworthy of something better. I literally see people that will punish themselves because they feel unworthy. They will quit because they feel unworthy, like they're not good enough. They, in the back of their minds or the back of their consciousness, they remember horrible things that they did in past lives, and they still can't let go of that stuff so that they can open their cup and receive something greater than they knew was possible for themselves. Like you're saying, it's like one has to first learn how to love themselves, and a lot of negative polarity people have it beaten into them that they should not love themselves. So much so that they become disoriented, they lose touch with this inner compass. And that was one of the really neat things that happened with this Satanist, was all of a sudden he had this profound inner compass where he could just, if he wanted the answer to something, he'd just know it. Like it would just come right in, right knowingness would just come to him, and he would know the answer. And I just thought that's profound. What you're saying is like really profound, like this full circle thing. It's really profound and beautiful.
Well, and when you mention that too, what's so important is for people to realize that every single one of us started out in a negative polarity. If not many, many negative polarities. So there's not one of us who is, immune from that. We were all there, whether in this lifetime or another, probably in both.
Yeah.
And so I think the reality, and that's so true because people do this and they don't realize that the reality is that this is what "but for the grace of God go I" means. And so that's what we do is we accept that grace and we accept it, we step into it, and we allow it to bend and mold and move us forward. If we don't, then we cannot alter or change or evolve into anything more than we've ever been.
Yes.
But we've all been that. Not one of us has not.
So true. And actually, it reminds me a little bit of Milarepa. Milarepa taught what I practiced too. Milarepa was like this great sinner who became this amazing saint.
Right.
At one point, because Milarepa chose that path, he worked out hundreds or more years of karma in about 7 years. And during that time, because he had used demons to attack people, he actually went through a period of karma where he was being attacked by demons. He sicked demons on people, now they were sicking on him. But what was interesting
Yep.
what was interesting was that he actually he took on a special role called the Living Varden Master, where he had certain gifts and abilities. And one of those abilities was he could go beyond the Akashic records and read what is called the soul records. He actually did soul record readings of these demons, which is really he had compassion for them, and he saw them as soul. Now, I don't recommend chasing after demons and buddy-buddying with them. Buddy-buddying with someone who could harm you. That I don't recommend.
Right.
But because it was his karma and he had to work it out, he was actually doing soul record readings of them. And he actually told these beings that were in demon form that in past lives they were in human bodies, but they had committed errors and mistakes and harms that were so terrible that they were assigned to incarnate in these demon bodies. And that now that he as a master could free them of that level of existence if they wanted to. And so all of the demons, except for their leader, decided that they wanted to be free. And Milarepa sort of, he helped them to leave the demon bodies and go into this higher state, this higher form. Because, as soul, they were ready to move on to something where they were less limited, where they could experience greater freedom and joy and heal. And so that's an interesting example of compassion that, like you said, all souls go through periods of extremely negative polarity incarnations and extremely positive incarnations. And
the reality is that that's the nature of evolution itself. That we move up from the below. So, we are where we are in these worlds where the battles between good and evil reside because that's, we've just been moving up from these low ourselves. So we are no stranger to that. But, we do not progress by being upset about that. We progress by recognizing that, okay, so we are not as far along the path as we'd hoped, but by golly, the way we're going to continue to proceed is by continuing to proceed.
One of the things that people have to learn, and from my experience, it has been that they let go of the past. Isn't there something Jesus said, don't turn around or something, don't look back at the... I don't know which quote that was.
That was from the Old Testament, from the Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't look back, as it was going to be destroyed, turn into a pillar of salt. Yeah, you had to move forward. That's very true. We have to move forward. There's kind of like a real waste of energy that can go into focusing too much. There is a purpose in understanding from where we came, but there has to be balance to it.
Yes. After the interview, I later recorded this little snippet, and we'll get back to Marilyn in just a second. I just wanted to say that Marilyn is incredible in the practice of astral projection. She's had thousands of experiences, but I must clarify that I personally, or in Varden, which I practice, I do not do astral projection. I specifically practice the science of soul projection, but it is distinctly different. And so I'm going to give actually an example to kind of clarify what I'm talking about. I recall on one occasion sitting in this huge convention center with thousands of people, and I was filled with so much love and appreciation for each soul. As I was doing my spiritual exercise, I was chanting a sacred name for God, and I was focusing this way, and then all of a sudden I was shocked. I was hovering on the ceiling, 200 feet above, and I was looking down way up from the ceiling in this bird's eye view where you could see thousands of people in their chairs. And to my shock, when I looked down, I saw my physical body sitting in the chair, but then above that, I saw other bodies. Almost like if you've ever seen those Russian dolls, there was me as pure soul, which is beyond time and space, a divine spark of God. And then below that was another body that was very fine, the etheric body of beautiful light, but it was less matter. And then underneath that was another body, which was a little bit more matter, another body, and another body. So there were several bodies. And so what happened was, me as pure soul, I went like those Russian dolls. One body, boop, went into the next body, bloop, went into the next body, bloop, went up to the next body, and so forth, until suddenly I was sitting in my chair. And that earlier experience showed me that, yes, above the physical body, which is more matter and less spirit, there is this astral body. But then above that astral body is this other body, the causal body, and above the causal body is the mental body from the mental plane. Some call it mental projection. And then above the mental body is the etheric body. And then above that is pure soul. And pure soul has this awareness that is vast, where you can be in all places at the same time. So when I am talking about soul projection, I am talking about a completely different practice. The astral body can access the astral universe, which has hundreds of thousands of subplanes that look like individual heavens in themselves, but they're all part of the astral. Pure soul accesses heavenly realms that are not accessed by the astral and causal. And the reason I have to state this is I don't want to confuse people. After I did this recording, my husband was saying to me, Heather, you're making it confusing. People are going to think you're talking about astral projection. I just want to make it clear that I am not talking about astral projection. I am talking about movement of soul. And if you look, we have this map of heaven, but I do want to make a distinction that, for instance, one of the planes that I was talking about in the pure positive God worlds, I was referring to a plane just above the Anami lock, which is a plane of seeing, knowing, and being, omnipresence, total awareness, a deep sense of knowingness. This sort of omnipresence is completely different than the sort of expansive awareness that appears to be on the presence of the causal plane near the Akashic records. The light and sound in the upper to mid-astral and upper to mid-causal plane can be brilliant and celestial, but it is completely different region than the pure positive God worlds. It may sound similar, but it's completely different. The light and sound is far, far beyond thousands and thousands of suns. It's just, you can't compare it to the physical. You can't compare it to the causal plane whatsoever. There are no angels there. There are no things that look like physical or causal buildings. There are no objects whatsoever. The astral and causal and mental planes are below what is called the second grand division. The Anami, or pure positive God worlds, are much, much higher. There's absolutely no mind there whatsoever. There's no language for this. So I just really want to emphasize it's nothing like the causal plane. Thank you. There's no language for this. So I just really want to emphasize it's nothing like the causal plane, which is very profound and an enlightening interview. So now we'll hand it back to Marilyn. Thank you. So we only have about 2 minutes left. So I want to ask you, in parting, is there a piece of wisdom that you would like to share with the listeners that you think might be helpful to them?
Well, one thing I like to tell people is that, in many of the out-of-body experiences I've been shown this beautiful staircase from heaven to earth made out of the ancient sacred texts written by the prophets, saints, mystics, sages, ascetics, desert mystics, hermits, Remember that the gold, the key to our mystery of existence here, is left to us in those writings that were left by those great souls right before they left this earth for the last time. And it's still out there for us to glean from. And the key to that journey that we're taking from earth to heaven is purification. And the purification pathway begins with love.
Yes. Divine love, wisdom, power, and freedom. Thank you so much. Everything that you shared was deeply insightful, and you've given a great gift of love, and that may touch some individuals' hearts and may move them in ways that maybe they didn't imagine were possible. So thank you for this amazing love that you're a vehicle for.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. It's great meeting you, and I've enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, so much. So, this has been The Secrets of Heaven and with OBEs and negative polarity experience. Again, thank you, and to the listeners too, and we're deeply grateful for the divine gifts that have been shared tonight. Really inspiring. And we want to say thanks for listening to Bridge Between Worlds Radio. Have a great night.